There comes a time in every life when the winds do howl and the waters rise, when voices accuse and fingers point, when the world expects you to flinch, to crumble, to roar in return. But what dignity it is to rise, not with anger, but with a stillness that sings of inner fire. This is not a lesson in hiding, no. It is a dance of discipline, a grace note of the soul. To learn to act as if nothing bothers you is to choose your peace over petty wars. Let me tell you how. There is a quiet thunder in the way a woman holds herself when the world tries to pull her apart. Not with clenched fists or wild eyes, but with her spine straight and her gaze steady, as if to say, I have seen greater storms than this. Poise is not born in comfort. It is carved from chaos. It is shaped when the night is too long, the hurt too sharp, and still she rises, lips pressed into a soft line, shoulders draped in quiet courage. Poise is not a performance. It is the soul's decision to keep its balance when everything else around it sways. It is knowing the fire burns, but refusing to let it consume your voice. A poised spirit walks into a room and shifts the air, not because it demands attention, but because it commands respect. It's the elegance of restraint, the dignity of not reacting, even when reaction is deserved. It is not the absence of pain, but the presence of power. Power that does not boast, power that does not chase validation, power that whispers, I know who I am, and keeps moving, unfazed, undisturbed. There is a kind of beauty that cannot be taught in mirrors or bought in silk. It is the beauty of the unshaken, the woman who holds her tongue not out of fear, but out of wisdom, the man who does not flinch when insulted, not because he lacks pride, but because his pride is too full to be threatened by noise. Poise is a language the spirit speaks fluently once it has been betrayed, belittled, broken, and yet still chooses peace over performance. It is in the way you carry your sorrow with symmetry, the way you take disappointment by the hand and teach it how to dance without bitterness. It is how you answer ignorance with grace, how you face injustice without folding into rage. It is not silence, but a kind of melodic quiet that sings of self-mastery. It is being soft without surrendering. It is being still without becoming stuck. Poise is a holy refusal. A refusal to be rushed, rattled, or ruined by things that don't reach your soul. It's the kind of posture you earn through pain, through patience, through picking yourself up time and again with elegance, never allowing the world to dictate the rhythm of your breath or the dignity in your walk. To rule over one's emotions is not to deny them, child. It is to name them without becoming them. It is to sit beside your anger like an old friend, to offer it tea and listen, but not to let it drive the chariot of your day. Emotional sovereignty is the quiet crowning of the self. It is the reclamation of your inner throne where no one else, no lover, no stranger, no storm holds the keys to your peace. You see, people will come and people will go. They will toss their moods like stones at your joy. They will spit their judgments and wear their own wounds as weapons, hoping you will bleed beside them. But when you are sovereign, you do not react like the wind to every open window. You do not sway with every opinion. You are not a leaf, darling. You are the root. You do not float, you ground. You do not flee, you remain. You are not at the mercy of other people's weather. To be emotionally sovereign is to feel everything fully and still choose your response with care. It is to know that someone else's chaos is not your invitation to abandon yourself. It is to observe the storm without becoming the storm. And oh, what discipline that takes. To feel that rising heat in your chest, the sting behind your eyes, the ache in your belly, and still say to yourself, I will not be moved unless I choose to move. That is not weakness. That is sacred strength. And this strength, it does not shout. It does not throw tantrums in crowded rooms. It does not seek revenge or beg to be understood. It sits in silence, not because it has nothing to say, but because it has already heard its own voice, and that is enough. It is the kind of mastery that makes you magnetic, not for how loud you are, but for how grounded you remain when the ground itself shakes. Emotional sovereignty means refusing to be baited by disrespect. It means smiling not as a mask, but as a reminder that your joy is not on loan. It means you do not hand over your mood like a coin to every petty toll booth you pass. You do not let your heart be tugged around by the immaturity of others. You do not let your spirit be hijacked by offense or by flattery. Both are dangerous when they lead you too far from your center. There is a noble quiet in the emotionally sovereign being, a calm earned through nights of unraveling and days of rebuilding. It's not about detachment, no, but about deep-rooted presence, about knowing your emotions are visitors, not rulers, that your pain may visit, but it does not inherit your crown. Your fear may speak, but it does not hold the mic. Your loneliness may knock, but it does not move in without your permission. There is a kind of dignity that does not make a sound. It does not beg for acknowledgement. It does not shout its name in crowded places. It walks in quietly, but all the walls recognize its presence. Silent dignity, child, is the garment worn by those who have known both praise and humiliation and have chosen to be owned by neither. It is the deep breath you take before answering cruelty with calm. It is the still gaze that does not flinch when insulted, because it knows what stands behind it, a life lived in truth. It is not silence born of fear or passivity. No, it is the silence that comes after wisdom has spoken within. It is the quiet of someone who has nothing to prove because they have already proven it to themselves. It is the stillness that says, I will not descend into noise, even when provoked. Silent dignity is a river that flows beneath the surface, strong, steady, carrying centuries of resilience in its current. And it is most radiant in the face of injustice. When the world expects you to grovel, to break, to defend your humanity with rage, silent dignity responds with presence. It does not lower its standards to match the moment. It lifts the moment up with its very posture. You see, when you stand in silent dignity, you remind those who would diminish you that you cannot be made small by smallness. Your silence becomes a mirror in which others must see themselves. This kind of dignity does not come cheap. It is earned slowly through seasons of biting back words that would only feed the fire, through years of carrying wounds that never made it to the surface, because healing happened beneath the skin. It is the way an elder looks at the world, with eyes that have seen too much to be impressed by cruelty and too deeply to be seduced by shallow praise. It is a knowing, and that knowing does not need applause. Silent dignity is the refusal to argue with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. It is the grace to walk away without dragging peace behind you. It is the strength to stay soft in a world that mistakes volume for value. There is something holy about a person who knows they are right and does not raise their voice to prove it. Something divine about the one who can sit through a storm of noise and still hear their inner melody humming clear, unwavering, unshaken. When you carry silent dignity, you do not flinch at gossip, for you are not made of rumors. You do not crumble at slander, for your worth was never built in other people's mouths. You do not lash back at provocation, because your power is not performative. It is planted. It is rooted. It is old as the earth itself, the kind of dignity that walks beside you even when you are alone, that tucks you in when the world is cold, that reminds you who you are when the noise tries to make you forget. Restraint, my dear, is not weakness. It is wisdom dressed in discipline. It is the art of pausing when every bone in your body begs to react. It is the sacred space between impulse and response, the breath you take before the storm inside you speaks. And it is in that breath, that small holy pause, where your truest self is revealed. The mirror of restraint does not reflect the face you show the world when all is calm. It reveals who you are when the world dares you to unravel. We have been taught to believe that strength is loud, that power must always assert itself, that to be seen is to be vocal, sharp, unrelenting. But the soul knows better. The soul understands that some of the greatest strength lies in holding back, not out of fear, not from suppression, but from sovereignty. Restraint is the practice of refusing to let others drag you out of your divine alignment. It is saying, you do not own my reaction. I will not loan you my peace for the price of temporary satisfaction. When you choose restraint, you become a mirror for those who have not yet learned to govern themselves. They throw their fire, and in your calm, they see the chaos in their own reflection. They raise their voice, and in your silence, their volume becomes an echo. You show them, not with words, but with presence, how power is not proven in the shout, but in the stillness that refuses to bow to provocation. Your restraint reveals their restlessness. Your steadiness exposes their need for reaction as validation. And yes, there will be moments when every thread of your dignity feels stretched thin, when you could burn bridges with a single sentence, when you could wound with truth or clap back with elegance. But to restrain yourself is not to silence your soul. It is to trust that your spirit does not need to flex to be felt. That your presence, your integrity, your history, your prayers, all of it, is louder than anything you could say in anger. This mirror, this quiet clarity, shows you yourself too. You begin to see where your triggers lie, where old wounds still whisper, where your pride seeks to be fed. And instead of obeying those ancient voices, you bow only to your higher self. You walk away from the bait. Not because you are blind to it, but because you are bigger than it. You have learned that sometimes the highest act of courage is to close your mouth, lift your head, and let the moment pass without clinging to your name. To hold your tongue when it burns, to soften your face when it stiffens, to unclench your hands when they itch to point or punish. That is a sermon the soul preaches without sound. That is mastery, quiet and shining. The mirror of restraint reflects not how the world treats you, but how you choose to treat yourself in return. It is the way you answer chaos with a straight back and a full breath. The way you choose peace, not because you lack the words, but because your peace is more valuable than being right. There is a sacred posture one adopts when they've learned to walk with giants. Not the giants of fame or fortune, but those whose spirit stretches across time. Elders, ancestors, warriors of the heart who endured without bitterness, who stood tall when the world tried to shrink them. To walk with giants is to walk knowing you do not walk alone. It is to feel the weight of legacy pressing gently on your shoulders, reminding you that you were never meant to crawl through life when you were born of people who sang through suffering and still raised their heads toward heaven. Giants do not move quickly. They do not rush. They have no need to prove their presence. Their very breath shifts the room, and their silence speaks volumes. When you walk with giants, you walk slower, deeper, more mindfully. You speak less but say more. You begin to understand that power is not in how fast you respond, but in how thoughtfully you move. You walk with a quiet reverence, as if every step is a conversation with the earth, as if the ground itself remembers who you are becoming. To walk with giants is to carry the grace of those who came before you, those who bore injustice with poise, who answered cruelty with clarity, who kept their joy braided into their grief. It is to remember that your dignity is not a personal achievement, but a collective inheritance. And with that knowledge, your walk becomes an offering. Your restraint, your wisdom, your unshakable calm, they are not just for you. They are echoes of the ones who held their peace so you could have yours. These giants, they taught us without raising their voices. They showed us that you don't need to shout when you know where you stand. That humility is not the absence of greatness, but the quiet presence of it. That your name doesn't have to be on billboards to be etched into eternity. You begin to understand that walking with giants is not about being seen. It's about being aligned with truth, aligned with justice, aligned with the deep, slow rhythm of your soul. And when the world tries to pull you down into smallness, when it tries to bait you into bitterness or hustle you into haste, you remember your place among the giants. You remember how they moved with patience, how they responded with vision, how they chose legacy over momentary applause. You remember that you are descended from those who endured the unimaginable and still created beauty, who planted seeds of hope in soil soaked with sorrow and still managed to bloom. And in remembering them, you become them, not in body, but in spirit. The spirit is not born strong, child. It is shaped. It is stretched. It is softened and sharpened through the ritual of living. Just as the body must sweat and strain to become agile, the spirit must ache to become wise. Training the spirit is not an act of ease. It is an act of reverence. It is rising every morning and choosing integrity when convenience would do. It is standing still in the middle of noise and listening for the quiet voice within, the one that speaks not of ego, not of pride, but of purpose. To train the spirit is to enter into relationship with yourself, not just in joy, but in discomfort. It is sitting with your own shadows and not flinching. It is naming your anger without letting it rule, touching your sadness without letting it drown you. The spirit grows through these conversations, intimate, silent, often painful. You learn not to escape what you feel, but to shape it, like clay in the hands of a sculptor. The fire does not destroy the spirit. It refines it if you let it. This kind of training is quiet. It happens in the choices no one sees, when you forgive and no one says thank you, when you walk away and no one knows what you held back, when you are kind, not because they earned it, but because you decided you would not be changed by someone else's cruelty. You are building muscle in your soul every time you choose grace over reaction, vision over vengeance, patience over panic. The spirit learns through repetition, not in the grand gestures, but in the daily rituals of choosing what is noble over what is easy. And child, the spirit gets tired. It will ask you to quit. It will whisper, "What's the use?" when nothing seems to change. But you remind it that you do not train for applause. You train for alignment, for strength that cannot be taken, for a peace that does not beg to be validated. You are shaping your spirit into something that can carry you through storms with dignity intact. You are teaching it not to sway with the winds of opinion, but to root itself in truth, deeper than circumstance. In this training, there are no shortcuts, no cheat codes, just presence, patience, and prayer. You learn to honor your pace. You begin to trust your rhythm. You start to see that every challenge, every betrayal, every silence from those you thought would stay is part of your training. Not punishment, preparation. You understand that hardship is not a sign you are off your path, but often the very proof that you are walking it well. You begin to thank the fire, not because it felt good, but because it showed you what within you could not be burned. You begin to rise, not because you were unshaken, but because your spirit, trained and tempered, knew how to rise again. Life, my dear, is a grand stage, not always lit by spotlights, not always dressed in applause, but still a stage nonetheless. And whether you perform in silence or in sound, the act is yours alone to embody. The curtain rises each day with the sun, and it asks you, not for perfection, but for presence. Not for the script the world wrote for you, but for the truth etched quietly in the marrow of your bones. The stage of life demands not that you impress, but that you reveal. And you must understand, not everyone in the audience came to see you succeed. Some sit in silence, arms crossed, waiting for you to stumble. Others will clap, but not for you. They applaud what they project upon you. And still, there are those few who see your soul beneath the costume, who nod at your courage even when your voice trembles. But your performance, your becoming, your dance through light and shadow is not for them. It is for the divine director who placed the breath in your lungs and whispered, "Now go, live." The stage is not always kind. There will be scenes where betrayal takes center stage, where grief steals the spotlight, where failure stutters across your lines, and still you must show up with trembling hands, with a spirit worn thin from rehearsals you never asked for. You must show up. Because the greatest act of all is not the performance, it is the persistence, the grace to keep standing when your knees buckle, the humility to begin again when the last act brought you to your knees, the courage to improvise when life hands you silence where you expected song. And oh, how often life hands you silence, empty spaces where applause should have been, quiet where you expected recognition, shadows where you thought light would pour in. But even then, especially then, your task remains the same: to honor your role with dignity, to carry your truth like a torch, even if no one else sees the flame. Because on this stage, the audience does not decide your worth, the mirror of your soul does. You are not here to entertain, you are here to embody. This stage, with all its turning scenes and abrupt intermissions, asks you not to be a character, but to be real, to weep when needed, to laugh from the belly, to whisper wisdom when others expect silence. You learn that the costume does not make the character. The titles, the praise, the applause, they fall away like tattered fabric. What remains is your essence, your resilience, your choice to act with compassion when cruelty cues its lines, your choice to hold the scene when the script goes blank, your choice to honor the divine story being written through you, line by sacred line. There is a strength, child, that does not come from motion. It does not shout, it does not scatter, it does not busy itself to prove its value. It sits, it waits, it listens. Stillness, when understood, is not the absence of action. It is the presence of mastery. It is a throne carved in the center of chaos, where a person may sit unshaken, unbothered, unmoved by the noise that would pull lesser souls into frenzy. Stillness is not what the world taught you to admire, but it is what the soul has always known to seek. We live in a time that worships the hustle, the sprint, the endless grasping. But stillness says, I already am. I do not chase because I am not lacking. I do not hurry because I trust the timing of the divine. To be still is not to be idle. It is to be in alignment. When you are still, you can hear the truth behind the words, feel the wind beneath the noise, sense the whisper of your own intuition rising like a tide. Stillness is the space where the spirit stretches, where wisdom finds its voice and speaks not to impress, but to illuminate. And it takes a seasoned soul to be still when provoked. When the world jabs at your dignity, when chaos spins around your feet, when voices rise like storms trying to rattle your calm, stillness is a protest, a sacred defiance. It says, "You will not move me from my peace." That kind of stillness is power of the oldest kind, the kind that mothers passed down in their silences, in the way they kept their backs straight and their eyes soft, even as the world tried to bend them. It is the kind of power that does not depend on dominance, but on discernment. To rest in stillness is to trust in what does not need to be rushed. It is to recognize that urgency is often the enemy of clarity. In stillness, the fog clears. In stillness, you remember who you are when nothing is pulling at you, when there is no need to perform or persuade. And oh, what a mighty thing it is to know yourself in quiet, to return to your breath like it is a prayer, to sit in the presence of your own being and know that you are enough, not because you achieved, but because you simply are. Stillness is a mirror. It shows you what flutters needlessly inside, what habits try to fill the silence, what fears scurry through the mind when nothing distracts them. And yet instead of running, you remain. You let the silence do its work. You let the quiet undo what noise has built. You learn that stillness is not the pause before power. It is power, the soft kind, the deep kind, the kind that moves mountains not by force, but by being unmoved, the kind that changes the room by entering it, not by dominating it, the kind that comes not from doing, but from knowing, from remembering, from simply being rooted so deeply that no wind can shake you.